Hi, good morning.
Hello.
Um, I'm going to look up there. So I'm John,
I'm Mike.
and we're pastors here at WestWay Christian Church, and we do this every Tuesday at 11:15 ish.
You do it every
I
Tuesday.
I do it literally every Tuesday.
The rest of us take turns.
Yep, yep. So we do this thing each week, most weeks, every week, to talk about some thoughts and questions that come up from our message time. Hey Scott, good to see you today. Today, what we're going to talk about, we didn't get any questions, but today or this past Sunday, the message was from 2 Timothy chapter 1, and that was the one I did in my backyard. That was my cue for what sermon we were going to talk about today. So this really weird thing is happening right now for me. So this will be a good time to get out my anxiety.
Schedule's all out of whack.
My schedule is all out of whack. So as I was trying to remember what text we were going to talk about today, I had in my brain next Sunday's sermon because of the way we're doing things right now. Like I've already given next Sunday's sermon. I've already recorded next Sunday's sermon. So I was like mentally wired to talk about 2 Timothy chapter 2. But that's not what I did last week. So we're going to talk about 2 Timothy
Back to
chapter
the
1.
fireside.
Yeah, back to the fireside. So there were three things, or one main thing that we talked about in Sunday's message, and it was Paul's charge to Timothy to fan into flames the gift that God had given him
Yeah.
when Paul was present. And the way I talked about that was in three ways. Was first off to use what God has given you. Second thing was to not be ashamed of Jesus or of Paul in prison. And then the third thing was hold on to, like, cling to what you've heard. So, I thought you were going to say something.
No.
Okay. So we talked briefly before this. So we thought it would be helpful. Like, what does that look like in our own lives? And these are things that I know we've talked about in the past. But when you think about fanning into flame the spiritual gifts that God has given you, like what does that mean, like kind of big picture for you?
I think big picture for Paul and Timothy was Paul encouraging Timothy to not shrink away from the task at hand, the job at hand. Because that job wasn't predicated on who Timothy was, but on who the Spirit was within Timothy. And so make the most of what has been given to you when I laid my hands on you and when I led you, when you learned from me. I think even recalling back to what he had learned from his mom and his grandmother. And all of that Paul had already mentioned, I think plays into this. Paul reminding Timothy, this is who you are, but you are so much more because you've been given the gift of the Holy Spirit within you, living in you. This is God in you. And you are and you have what it takes to do this huge monumental task that I just dumped on you of, establishing in some ways order in the church in Ephesus that sort of tended toward disorder, like everything does.
Yeah.
And so I think Timothy probably was a type of person who would have tended to shrink from that. Because, whether it's a lack of confidence or right after that, Paul says we haven't been given a spirit of timidity. Maybe that was Timothy's natural inclination just to kind of shrink back. And Paul is saying here, don't just rely on you, but fan into flames the gift that you've been given because you've been given a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. And so I guess I feel like I can probably relate to that. I don't tend to just boldly charge into a situation, say this is how it's going to be because this is what I think will work. Um, I tend to sit back and let people have lots of opinions and ideas, and in my own nature, I would just let them run with whatever they decided to run with, probably most of the time. Um, but I know in my role as a pastor, I have been charged with a task that that's not going to happen if I just shrink back from everything.
Yeah.
And so I remember some specific moments in like in Bible college where I was challenged by a couple different professors in different ways to make the most of the natural gift that I'd been given, and also beyond that, rely on the Spirit at work within you to do what He wants to do and what He wants to accomplish, which is far more than what I can accomplish anyway. And so that looked like diligently studying. And I know for some people that doesn't sound like how's that fan into flame? I think for me, digging into an issue, especially digging into scripture, for me is a way to add wood to the fire. Putting that constant new fuel into the flames is a way to keep it going. But really, that fanning that into flame is also putting it into practice. I could bury myself in books and study and be pretty content in that most of the time. But to really grow and to really make the most of the gifts that God has given me requires me to step out of the books and walk with people in their lives, putting into practice what I've learned and what I've studied. And so sometimes, muscles don't grow unless you work them. And I think in some ways this is it's a muscle issue. So there's, step back and study, but there's also been step out and do some work. Those have both been important for me to find a balancing point between that. Because the other side of things is you can work and work and work and work and just empty yourself. If you don't refill yourself, I think especially in ministry, we can become so empty. We're good at emptying ourselves, and we can become so good at that we don't stop to fill ourselves. I think especially in moments like we find ourselves in now,
right?
Our schedules have been completely wrecked and rearranged. You mentioned that earlier. And we can become so responsive to the situation that we become engrossed in learning new ways of doing things and making adjustments and responding to the situations of the people in our lives and their genuine need for us to be helpful with them. But if we don't slow down, if we don't stop and just breathe, then that robs the fire of necessary fuel as well. And so I think we need to be careful of that other side of things. Just empty ourselves so much that we don't have anything left to give. And so for me, fanning into flame has required kind of living in that tension between putting into practice what I know to be there, and also stepping back and resting and allowing God to refill me so that I have something more to give to the people that I'm serving.
What's interesting, just while you were talking, like the way you described yourself as like kind of a tendency to just not necessarily let things happen, but you lean more towards
Yeah.
that side of things. Um, like you and I are alike in a lot of ways, and I would say in that way that is something we are
Yeah.
polar opposites.
Right.
Um, so as I read,
So just do what you want. It's okay with me. I'll adjust.
yeah. Well, it's funny, like just the way, and then as I look at this spirit that God has given us of power, love, and self-discipline, like for me, as I think about that, um, I don't know that I have, like, I'm comfortable with the power of those three things. I'm comfortable with the power taking action
Uh-huh.
side of that. And you mentioned it, and I talked about this, I think, this past Sunday a little bit, like walking into what was happening in Ephesus. If someone is fearful and timid, like that's not going to work in that environment.
Right.
Um, so for me, like that kind of chaos, I think a person like me would like I think I could thrive in that in terms of trying to bring order to the chaos. But those last two pieces, the love and the self-discipline, like that would really have to click for me.
Yeah.
Because I know my own tendency of like getting things done is not always in alignment with love and self-discipline. So for me to hear this, and for me to hear the way you're describing this, is like really helpful for me in my own growth and my own discipleship, because these three things were given. It wasn't just one. Hey Timothy, they don't just need someone to go in there and fix them.
Yeah.
They need someone who is going to love them and demonstrate self-discipline in the midst of that, in the midst of the use of that power. And that's really good for a person like me to hear.
Yeah, I think we look at someone like Paul, who was kind of a take charge, kind of this is what's going to happen, and we can see the evidence of the Spirit's power moving in his life.
Yeah.
But Paul also had the spirit of love and self-discipline as well. It's funny when you say yourself, you may not have, the self-discipline part. I would argue, how many days in a row have you run? That's self-discipline.
Yeah.
But it's funny how sometimes we don't categorize certain things in a spiritual way. Like that's just running, maybe to you.
Right.
But it still is an exercise of self-discipline.
Yeah.
And I think Paul and Timothy maybe had, they were kind of at those poles as well. And so this is Paul saying to Timothy, maybe it goes into the imitate me as I imitate Christ area as well. But Paul's natural inclination in Ephesus would have probably been a little more bold and confrontational than Timothy's. But Paul doesn't tell Timothy, hey, you need to do this the way I would do it.
Yeah.
You need to do this my way. He says, make the most, fan into flames, the gift that you've been given. Paul didn't turn Timothy into Paul, part 2, when he laid his hands on him. He instigated him into a ministry that was shaped partially by who Timothy was. Because when the Spirit transforms us, but he also works through the way he's already built us. And I think we need to maybe keep that in mind as well. If you're leading something or even just searching for answers sometimes in a really questionable time, it's easy to look and see like what's this person doing or what's this person doing. But to fan into flames the gift that God has given you, you really need to dig into Him, not the guy down the road or the lady that seems to have everything so well put together. Who has God made you to be? And what is the gift that He's placed within you that He wants to use right now? Not only is there room for both ends of that spectrum, I think both ends are needed. A spirit of power can be pretty corrosive if we're not tempering it with love and self-discipline. Yeah. A spirit of love might just tend to let things go, let things slide that shouldn't be allowed to slide, if it's not also bolstered with that spirit of power and self-discipline. A spirit of self-discipline could just say, hey, I'm doing my own thing, I'm doing really good, and be blinded to the people that are around you that need you to love them, and have something to gain from the power that you wield on their behalf. And so I think it's a package deal.
Yeah.
The spirit.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to keep in mind. But yeah, to back up a little bit, I think the fanning into flames of that gift really requires consistently acting on what God impresses on me in the moments that I'm still with Him. I think if God impresses something on me and I don't do anything with it, that stifles the spirit as well.
Yeah.
So it really does require both.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really helpful. Like I said, this is pressing on me today. I woke up for some reason this morning. Well, I know why. Like, I woke up this morning with just a lot of anxiety.
I can't imagine why that would be right now.
I know, it's crazy. I woke up today with a lot of anxiety, just like as much as the last 6 weeks has been what it's been. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But like, as much as the last 6 weeks has been what it's been, probably the next 6 weeks are going to be challenging in a completely different way. Yeah. And what I told Ann, like right before I left home, what I said was, I don't know which I prefer. Do I prefer the anxiety of, hey, it's Monday and you guys can't meet next Sunday and you have to figure out what you're going to do in 5 days? Like, that is one set of anxiety. Or do I prefer the anxiety or the tension that comes from, hey, at some point in the next 6 weeks, your church body is going to regather and you have 6 weeks to figure out what that looks like. Yeah. Like, which space do I prefer to be in? Oh my word, the world's on fire. I have to figure out what I'm going to do in the next 4 days or 5 days. Or the world's going to be on fire in 6 weeks and you have to plan for that. And I know, like, that's sort of an exaggeration. That's how I feel. But like, hearing these things for me right now is just really helpful because my tendency is to try and power through these moments and come up with a plan and think, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to get that done. And just like, and just like go into that plan. But what this is saying is I need to be more, I don't know, holistic, I guess. I need to recognize that what God has for me is not just, hey, John, you guys need to create a plan and then make this happen. You have to take into account other people, like that's empathy, and how are they going to respond in the midst of this? And so all in all, I've said it a number of times. Like this is good for me today. It's good for me to have this conversation. And I want to say this is one of the reasons why we do these Q&As every week, is not just for the people that are watching this, but for us to help us navigate through this.
I don't know if we were supposed to tell people that.
Yeah, we are. We're allowed to. I mean, to help me navigate, to help us navigate what these things look like. And I think that's part of fanning into flames, is recognizing that what do we put on the fire at what point? Right? Like, sometimes a fire probably needs more oxygen than it does wood.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I was going with that analogy. I like that analogy, but I haven't developed it.
When you were talking on Sunday, when we were watching the video on Sunday, Lizzie kind of made a joke about putting on too much wood and putting the fire out. It's like, if you just keep putting on fresh wood, it's not going to catch fire fast enough. And I said, yeah, like, and we kind of made this visual joke about how to stamp out the fire. And she said, I don't know, one of us said something about if you had a candle and you just dropped a log on it into the fire, you did not fan that into flame.
Right.
You just crushed it.
Yeah.
And I think it takes some experience and wisdom that we gain from community to really know, when do I need to blow some more air into that, and when do I need to add some more wood to the fire? Both of those are fuel. I mean, it's not going to burn without oxygen. It's not going to burn without wood. But if you blow too much, you're going to put the fire out as well. And so where's that balance point? I think sometimes community is where we find wisdom to help us recognize the balance point. And do I need to blow more, or do I need to put more air? That's the same thing. Do I need to put more air in, or do I need to put more wood on the fire?
Yeah.
And so, stuff like this Tuesday Q&A that we do, that's what it's for. It's community learning in some ways. One of the things I was going to mention, you kind of talked about the chaos of the situation and knowing what to do, and the anxiety of this situation versus that situation. I've been really thankful that we've been a part of a team and teams that have been so flexible during this time. Like, we can make a call and say, hey, we want to try this.
Yeah.
Or what if we tried this? And people respond like, okay, let's try it. And if it works, awesome. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. I really appreciate that part of our culture. And just the way that we've been able to pivot fairly quickly. I mean, it's only been like 6 weeks.
I know.
And we're doing things all completely different that we haven't done before. We're not doing them perfectly, but we're doing pretty well with a lot of things. And I think that's an indicator of our responsiveness to the Spirit and the gift that He is in our lives. He's way bigger than this situation and way more powerful than this situation. He has all the love that is needed in this situation. And really, He is what we need in this situation. And the more we can, I don't want to say the more we pay attention to Him, the better off we'll be, because that seems so obvious. But if we spend more time listening to Him than we spend listening to whatever your favorite news media is.
I was going to say, don't say it. I was going to say, don't say it.
I saw his eyes go, oh,
No.
no. But really, we need to spend time listening to God.
Yeah.
Because out of all of this chaos, he has the capacity to make something beautiful and something great that the world has never seen before.
And he is. I mean, we're seeing these things happen now in ways that we could not have imagined them. I mean, just the conversation and feedback that we hear from people on a weekly basis about ways God's working, the opportunities they've had to share the good news of Jesus with other people. And this has opened up a lot of doors for us. I can't believe it's only been 6 weeks. I feel like I've been recording sermons forever. I have no idea. I was even thinking about this morning, like thinking about that regathering plan.
It's gonna be weird to stand on the stage.
It's gonna be weird to stand on the stage. Like I don't know. I'm trying to wrap my mind around what that's gonna be like. So yeah, that part is gonna be weird. But also, you were talking about the pivot and the change that we made. We talked a little bit about this. There's a group of leaders at WestWay that meet by Zoom every Monday night. Kind of a standing weekly invitation to discuss what they're seeing happening within our body and in our community, and then long-term plans. And one of the things that we talked about last night was we've been able to make this pivot and this change to the things that we're doing because God knew exactly what our body needed before we did. And isn't it just amazing how all of the people who have all of these different talents and gifts and skills were just placed there by God so that when this happened, because it didn't catch God off guard, I've said that a bunch of times over the past few weeks, when that change happened, like we were just ready.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there haven't been challenges, because there have been multiple. But we had the people who were placed here to just go.
Yeah, one of the pastors that I know that has had a consistent influence on a lot of other pastors that I know, Raleigh Hutton, he always uses this phrase, God is always working upstream. I think this is a great example of that. God knows where we're floating to, and he's already there, and he's already preparing whatever we need for that moment. So that's something that we can rest in and rely on.
Well, here's I tried to get it in the show notes, but the place to put show notes on the camera that we're using is smaller than our normal one, and I exceeded the number of characters in what I was going to put in the show notes. So one of the things that you can help us with right now, and I'm going to have to do this in a few minutes, so you're going to have to loop back into this and find the link in probably 10 or 15 minutes or so. But one of the conversations that we are starting to have right now is what does regathering in our building look like over the next, let's just say 6 to 8 weeks. We sent an email out last week because we know that the governor said churches could start gathering after a certain time, and here are some restrictions to make that happen with. I've actually got a Zoom call in 15 minutes with Panhandle Health and other churches in town, because they're going to tell us like what, if you gather, these are the rules, these are the regulations you have to follow, of which there are many. But we've been having this conversation for probably the past week and a half now. Excuse me, gotta love it when that happens live. We've been having this conversation over the past week and a half. That's why I did it over there. And we need to hear from you during this time. So So we've created a survey. I think it has 8 questions on it. So far, about 35 people have taken it because we've been sharing it in different groups. We're ready to post it public. The average time for taking this survey is 3.5 minutes. So what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes or so is post a link to that survey in the notes for this. And we are asking that as many people as possibly can who are connected to WestWay respond to this survey, because that's helping shape some things that we're going to be doing over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I just really want to encourage you to respond to this survey, to pass it around to other people that you know here at WestWay Christian Church, because we want to respond in power, love, and self-discipline. We don't want to just do what we want to do. We don't want to do just what we think is best. We want to do more than take into consideration our church body. We want to take into consideration what God is doing during this time, how God is talking to you and communicating with you. And we just want to be faithful. Because we're not just church leaders, we are leaders of a specific body. We are shepherds of WestWay Christian Church. And one of the ways that we shepherd best is when our sheep tell us what they need. When our sheep tell us cautiously what they want. But we want to be responsive to our church body right now. And we want to be responsive to our church body at all times, but especially in a time like this, it's really important for us to be in sync with one another. So we understand those needs. So in a few minutes, I'm going to share that survey. I'm going to encourage you to take it, share it with other people. If you've already responded, thank you so much for doing that. That is helping us. And lastly, I just want to say we continue to want your prayers during this time. I put that at the end of the email over the weekend. If you could do anything for us as a church and as church leaders, pray for us, because this shouldn't scare you. I don't say this to scare you. We literally have no idea what we're doing right now. I told, and when Ann and I were talking about my anxiety level today, she said, "Yeah, why would you be anxious? You and the pastors at WestWay Christian Church are doing something that no one has ever done in the history of the world before. So why would we be anxious about that? Yeah. We just don't know." And that's not a scary thing, because that's like, I'm trusting that God has this down. But we just don't know we just don't know what we're doing. But we're trusting, what we are doing is we're trusting in God. We're comfortable in His leading. We're comfortable in doing what He asks us to do. And that's how 6 out of 7 nights of the week I can sleep, is God knows what's going on. And I'm working on that other day to be trusting in Him. So it will help us immensely if you share with us some feedback. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I guess we don't know what we're doing, but we're good at making it up as we go. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, somebody else used an analogy that I liked: building an airplane while it's in the air. That's a good analogy too. Like, I really like that one, because that's what the last month and a half has felt like. So next Sunday, we're going to be talking about 2 Timothy chapter 2. And this coming Sunday, we're only going to cover the first 14 verses. That's a little different than what you'll find in the study guide. My intent was to cover all of 2 Timothy 2 this coming weekend. But then I got into it and I'm like, yeah, I got to split this up. This just isn't going to work.
That's what happens when we make it up as we go.
Yep, there's a lot. So this coming week is 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 to 14. Love for you to spend time reading and reflecting and praying through that. And then join us at 10:15 next Sunday for our online 10:15. Yeah. And then sometime, we don't know when, we'll be back together. And we're looking forward to that. So, thanks for watching today. You guys encourage us, and I hope that this is a helpful time for you to learn and grow in your discipleship. So thanks. Be on the lookout for the show notes here in a few minutes. And as always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us here in the office. We love having conversations with you, and we're loving and praying for you. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.